Welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Andrew Zigler.
And I'm your host, Ben Lloyd Pearson.
This week, we're talking about OpenAI's acquisition of Windsurf, because who isn't? And a new competitor to Starlink's satellite internet. We're also discussing the growing divide between contributors and managers during AI adoption and how folks like you and me can avoid skill atrophy. But Ben, we got to start by talking about Windsurf, right?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I identify with that skill atrophy in the age of AI, we can hold off on that one for a moment and talk about this big news with windsurf.
Yeah, so it's been all over the news about OpenAI buying Windsurf for a $3 billion valuation. The Windsurf is a coding assistant tool. It's an IDE that allows a user to do agentic workflows to build software. This is, commonly used in a lot of different environments right now by folks experimenting with AI. You may recognize it as a leading competitor to Cursor. The deal, which hasn't closed yet, would be OpenAI's largest acquisition to date. And as you know, OpenAI is not shy about its acquisitions. In the past, it bought search and database analytics startup Rockset. It's also tried to buy the leading code IDE, agentic coding IDE Cursor before in the past. So OpenAI making this move now, acquiring Windsurf, getting a stake in the game for agentic AI and coding. Kind of an exciting development in the space. Ben, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I always, I'm happy to see competition in just any tooling in general. I think it's one of the things that really sets American tech companies apart is just how competitive it is. But this I really think is a simple one. OpenAI, they're just trying to build a moat, and they have a lot of money. And in fact, I think this is their attempt to buy a moat rather than build it. As a matter of fact, specifically in the software development space. So you mentioned Cursor. Like, yeah, it's obvious they couldn't get Cursor to sell to them, so they went to the next one. Of course, Cursor being like the fastest growing company in like history, based on revenue. It's going to be some stiff competition, I think, in both directions. Neither one of these companies really has a strong moat yet, even though, I think we are getting to the stage now where the leaders are starting to sort of establish the norms of this space. When I think about agentic coding, I think about Cursor rules and a lot of the features that they've built into their platform. And everyone's going to have their take on how that stuff should work. But right now, Cursor's the one that's out there, sort of leading the definitions around all of this. But with that said, I've heard a lot of positive things about Windsurf. I'm gonna have to check it out at some point. I know some people that have tried it and have really liked it, even people who know Cursor. So it's just something interesting to check out, and I like that we have a lot of competition in this space.
Yeah, I totally agree with the competition has only created a better ecosystem of tools. I've actually tried out Windsurf. I had a lot of luck with it. I think it's a really nice tool. So I think that there's space for, multiple players in this game to create a really great new future of development workspaces. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, and from surfing the wind here on Earth to surfing the solar winds up in space, let's talk about what Amazon has done with their big announcement this week.
Wow, what a transition. So let me launch this story into orbit for you. Amazon has launched its first Kuiper internet satellites, taking on Starlink in the satellite internet space. Um, Kuiper, you might read it as Kuiper. It's a Dutch word related to copper, and it's the name that Amazon has picked to describe its new satellite internet network. And in this space, we all think of Starlink as the incumbent and has the predominant mind share when people think about a satellite internet. But Amazon is now taking on that space and that industry head on with their own offering. And Ben, have you had any experiences with satellite internet before?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very familiar with the word Kuiper because of my 4-year-old who's obsessed with the solar systems. Yeah, I do actually like the name. For anyone who doesn't know, Kuiper is where all the cool dwarf planets hang out.
Very
Um,
cool.
but personally, on one hand, I'm like just hopeful that we're not headed towards like the world in Wall-E, the animated movie, where like our atmosphere is just littered with space junk all over the place. And I like found myself wondering today, it's like, when did we decide to just like let corporations like fill up low Earth orbit with all of these like space boats, you know? Um, I don't remember like personally that decision ever being made. But with that said, more data connectivity is a good thing over the long term, and rural areas really stand to benefit the most from this. Areas that have been left behind by a lot of the benefits of the internet age, whether that's in the developed world or even in the underdeveloped world. And I've already mentioned my opinions on competition. Like, I think competition is good for services like this. Within some reason, like there should probably be some regulations over the use of low Earth orbit. But I've also found myself wondering, like, with all the recent antitrust things that have been coming down the pipeline, specifically in the U.S. federal courts, how long until Amazon becomes under the microscope for like the seemingly like vertical monopoly that they're beginning to create?
It's definitely an interesting competition space. The idea of the world being enmeshed in all of these internet services, internet reaching the far flings of the earth, and people in rural areas having access to really fast speeds, like that can be really transformative for a lot of people in a lot of situations. It could even go as far as to save lives or educate people for the future. So on the overall, I think it's going to be a great development for people. But I agree with you that we, as a, as we launch more things in the orbit, we should think about how we're going to actually maintain this long term, and how things are going to go into orbit. So if you are listening to this and you have any insights on things entering and coming out of low orbit, and you want to connect us with somebody who's maybe even launching things into that space, we'd love to learn more about those decisions and how things get sent up into the sky, because that's a pretty cool application of engineering. There's a lot of technology behind it.
Yeah, we've long held the belief on this show, many of us here, that we would love to have somebody who has either been in space or sent things to space on our show, which we've talked to people who have like been adjacent to launching things into space. But if you are out there, somebody who is doing this, we would love to talk to you. So
Yeah.
let's get on to this story about atrophy in the age of AI. As somebody who often feels like I am maybe starting to become dumbed down because of my GPT usage.
Yeah, so this article was full of advice and actions you can take to avoid skill atrophy in the age of AI. It dives into the reality of critical thinking decay and frequent users of AI tools. And folks who are using this on a day to day basis, they're probably familiar with this kind of mentality. So I really encourage you to check out this article on Substack by Adi Osmani. We're going to include it in our news roundup. And some things that really stood out to me was about making sure you throw yourself into the pit of cognitive thinking on a regular basis and you fight through that struggle. It gave you a lot of great ways to re-inject yourself into these situations that you might be guarding yourself from with AI that prevent you from developing skills. And Ben, what kind of stood out to you as you read through this article?
Yeah, so just a personal anecdote. Last week I did a little like the most like artisanal content crafting that I've done in a while, as somebody who has definitely adopted AI for a lot of my workflows. And that was to prepare a conference talk. I'm gonna just real quick, I'm gonna plug an event that I'm at this week. I'm in Miami at the Code Remix Summit. So if you're there, come hit me up and let's meet and chat about AI or anything else under the sun. Um, but so, I've tried to be more intentional about this like artisanal work, so to speak. At least like on some sort of regular basis, like, once a week, if I can do something myself without making AI the like driving force behind it. I think that's a good practice to have. Another example is just reading articles all the way through. Like, I feel like this has been a trend really since the internet era. Like, our attention spans have gotten so short that it's hard to stay focused when you have like a long, in-depth article and actually read it to the end. So I read this article all the way to the end and have been more intentional about making sure that I'm doing that. Um, so, and there were two signs of over reliance in this article that really stood out to me because I've felt them. The first is like debugging despair. Like, if you're the kind of person that is just skipping reading error logs now and just automatically pasting them straight into AI, like, it could be a sign that you're over relying on these tools. And trust me, I'm super guilty of this. Like, I've done it plenty of times. but I've also recognized how limited it is at its ability to do a root cause analysis. So I never let it just be the only analysis. I will sometimes let it be the first analysis, or if I get stuck, help me get unstuck. But the sad part is there's actually a tool I just have been trying out in the last week, a brand new AI powered tool, and I really like it. But the thing that kind of stinks about it is it is like entirely built around this concept of like one shot co-pilot. Like you tell
Mm.
the AI what to do, and if it doesn't do it, you just click the button that says fix the error until it goes away. Yeah, so I kind of hope that's not
Oh,
our
no.
future.
Yeah, no, I don't wanna be in a situation where I'm unable to, get my hands on the terminal and do the debugging with it, where all I can do is just roll the dice on it hopefully generating the right command. That sounds
Yeah.
tortuous.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is you click that button enough and it often gets there, it often gets to
It
a fix.
can, but oftentimes, and I'm sure folks who've maybe been experimenting with this, sometimes it creates really strange workarounds the problems. I've had situations where my application was giving errors, and in trying to troubleshoot it, it would just change arbitrary parameters or things
Yeah,
about the environment to make the error go away or seem less critical than it was. So it's always a good call out to understand the patterns that your AI is using to solve problems and that you understand what's
yeah,
going
and
on.
and I mean, even Cursor can have the problem that you describe, like, quite frequently. But yeah, and then the other thing that really stuck out to me as a sign of over-reliance is losing your ability to do architecture and big picture thinking. So that's like if you're like accepting code without really understanding like the long-term sustainability and quality risks of that code. And personally, I've been kind of operating under this theory that, and I haven't thought a whole lot about this, so it could be completely off base, but I've started thinking about this idea that a lot of the frameworks that have been built for software development were designed to reduce human complexity. Like it was designed to help humans navigate the difficulties of creating software. But we're actually entering an era where AI can just abstract away all of that complexity. So how much do we actually need like all of these like JavaScript frameworks, for example? So I've gone way back to the basics. I'm like working back in like HTML, CSS, vanilla JavaScript, and just seeing what I can do to like orchestrate and control these like these agentic AI services. And so what I'm kind of getting at is like if you can feed it strong architecture, like help it make the right decisions, it can be a lot more effective at whatever code you need without the use of like all these dependencies and extra frameworks. But we'll see how this experiment goes. I actually don't know if it will be successful in the long term.
Well, one of the best ways to get to a good solid architecture, something that is a high quality document that you and a tool can work off of, is really understanding the fundamentals, right? So, one of the standout pieces for me from this article was not using AI to achieve those fundamentals because struggle
Yeah.
is good. And this was a really good reminder to me, and I think folks who will read it, that frustration is a key part of learning. And frustration is what enables you to remember, make connections that are important, but also think of solutions and problems that maybe you're not anticipating yet. And humans are still way better at this than agents. So you have to take that role when you partner with a tool to do your work in this way. That's one piece of advice that really stood out to me. But speaking of frustration, another story we're covering is the growing divide between developers and their bosses over how generative AI is adopted within their organizations. We're really loving this piece from Jen Riggins. It was on Lead Dev in the recent week about frustrating divides between developers and leaders during AI adoption at organizations. And it arrives at this by looking at taking a close look at a survey of over 2,000 IT managers and developers last year. And in this survey, leaders listed AI as the most important technical factor in improving developer productivity and satisfaction. And that's a huge surge in mind share for that leadership audience. Meanwhile, only a third of developers reported experiencing any significant AI productivity gains. And so, what this survey really highlights is the divide still between leaders and doers on how AI is actually impacting their work every day. And this is a cumulative piece that has quotes from folks all across the developer experience and productivity space that speak about this commonly. It also has a quote from yours truly in the article. I really recommend you check it out because there's so much cool advice in there from smart people that are talking about this. And so, Ben, what stood out for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think there are a few quotes from you, and it's really great to see that you're getting the opportunity to take what we're learning from our community and share it with audiences like over at Lead Dev, because I'm a huge fan of them. They do great work over there, so we love being able to share knowledge over there. But I think Ori Karen said it best when he came on Dev Interrupted back in December of last year, where he said that developer productivity is going to decline this year, and I think upper management is just going to have to accept that. Like, there's a lot of disruption that's happening just across all of knowledge work, not just software development. And there's a lot of adaptation that is taking place right now to respond to these disruptions. And change, adaptation, rethinking how you accomplish your work, that all detracts from what would conventionally be viewed as like productive work, for lack of a better phrase. You're not able to focus on shipping new features and moving faster when you're just legitimately trying to redesign how you complete your work. But I think there's a couple of traits that I'm seeing from organizations who are leading the charge with AI adoption. The first is that they provide really clear guardrails around AI usage. That's training on how to properly use it. That's guidance and resources that help provide context to models that make them do the right thing rather than hallucinating security vulnerabilities. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they're giving space for early adopters to experiment and share learnings with the rest of the company. So at just about any company out there, you've probably got a small percent of your developers who like to use new technology. They like to experiment. They like to find new ways to do things. They need to have the tools to let them do that, and then the space to experiment and the channels to share those learnings back with the rest of the organization. Developers want to reap like the benefits of AI, but the technology just isn't there for all use cases yet. So you want to let the people who can benefit from it benefit today, while teaching the people who are going to benefit tomorrow, what to expect. So, expect short-term productivity losses from this disruption is the point that I'm trying to make. And just be ready to reap the productivity gains that are around the corner. Like, they're starting to show up today, but they really just haven't fully manifested yet. So just get your organization ready for that future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Andrew, who do we have on the show today?
Yes, in just a moment, we're bringing JJ Tang of Rootly on the pod to talk about creating an engineering culture built on customer empathy. Stick around. Hey, everyone, for those of us just joining us, today we're joined by JJ Tang on the podcast. He's the co-founder and CEO of Rootly. And today we're tackling some really cool stuff because JJ is at the forefront of incident response automation, helping teams turn chaos into reliability. But more importantly, the work that he does at Rootly, it helps make our world a safer place by automating incident response for things like mission critical infrastructure. And today we're going to dive into how leaders can build with shiny new things like AI safely, why customer empathy is kind of an underrated engineering skill, and how teams can go beyond just reactive reliability. So, JJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. After seeing all the amazing guests you've had, I feel very special to be here.
Oh, no, it's totally the honors on our end. It's really great to have your perspective here. Like I said, I'm really excited about the topic. So let's just go ahead and jump right on in. I want to start by kicking off, right now, a lot of companies, they find themselves rushing to integrate new things, and maybe they're not stopping to fully consider things like reliability, trust, or usability at scale. And JJ, I know you're always thinking about building safely, and not just fast. That goes for all things, not just shiny new things with AI in them. But I wanted to start by asking, what are some of the common pitfalls engineering leaders face or fall into when integrating new stuff? And how do you think they can avoid them?
It's a great question. We serve some of the most mission critical businesses. We work with companies such as Dropbox all the way to NVIDIA, but we also have customers for example, in the Nordics, like 911 call centers. We work with nuclear energy plants and gas stations, and we cover the entire gamut. So for us to be reliable and secure as a platform becomes incredibly important. And one of the principles that we have from an engineering standpoint is we understand we are in the business of doing the boring things right. So when we started building our on-call product, the first thing we said, this has to be immensely reliable. So we developed this multi-cloud architecture that no one else in the industry had, and what felt like overkill. We never really had to use it in the purpose that it was built for, but it inspired a lot of trust. So I think there's this aspect of functional reliability and also perceived reliability that also becomes quite important. When we thought about building with AI, we said privacy and safety becomes the most important thing. I think in this world, in particular with AI, as companies are adopting it, if you're a vendor that is building AI into your tooling, you have to understand a lot of the customers that you're selling to and you're serving and that you're caring for are also venturing down this path at the same time. And if both of you view AI as this mysterious black box, then neither of you are going to trust each other. And so I think the onus is on the vendor to be incredibly smart with it. The recommendation and the thing that we found to be helpful for us is, I think integrating and building AI into your product is the easy part. I think truly understanding the power and also the dangers and pitfalls of AI is the other piece we spend a lot of time on. And so us as a business, we experiment constantly. We've developed our own Rootly AI lab specifically to tinker right on the bleeding edge of what these technologies can do and what they can't do. And so from there, we've been able to formulate our own guardrails and truly understand what the capabilities are, then conveying that in a truthful and trusted way back to our customer, I think inspires a lot of trust. And also for us, then suddenly safety and privacy becomes a core differentiator that we love. And I think for everyone else, your mileage may vary, and I think that's how you go from being this bolt-on AI product, maybe it's a wrapper for some organizations. There's nothing wrong with that either, to being this AI native company that truly understands what it's capable of.
Totally. It's more about like having the transparency of understanding its impact and what it's supposed to do, what it can do, what goes into it, what comes out of it. And, during that process, it's like there's a lot of alignment that has to happen. How do you think that engineering teams can ensure that the solutions and, shiny new stuff that they're using, it actually aligns with their business objectives and it has a measurable impact? Is there a pattern that you see successful teams kind of follow to achieve this?
Yeah, I think for individual teams, it has to be a sustained effort. I think when you view AI as just a singular feature of your product, then you go back to doing what you were doing before. The peaks and valleys become, either very high or very deep and can be quite jarring sometimes. What we've done, just as a side example, to ensure that we're constantly thinking in this AI first mindset and how we build sustainably over time and weave it in intelligent ways through our product, is every leader of every function inside of our business, we have a bi-weekly meeting where everyone presents new AI tools that they've been using. I would say 80% of them fall short. We tried some automated PR review tools, some QA tools. We tried some on the RevOps side that unfortunately didn't work out, but had a lot of
Just having a
promise
proof
on
of
paper.
concept, just a prototype, just, flexing out the idea.
Exactly. And what that did for us culturally was really important. It forced leaders to think in this mindset. It also forced us to explore what the latest and greatest was out there. And that naturally propagated itself through the rest of the organization. So when people talk about AI now, it doesn't feel like a novel concept as if we did 2 years ago. It just feels like a natural extension of our day-to-day workflow. I don't think we've gone as far as maybe Shopify, I know they came out with a memo recently saying, hey, you're not allowed to request for headcount unless you've approved that AI agents can't do your job. I don't think we are
Hmm.
there yet as a business, but maybe one day.
Yeah, we talked about that memo, on a recent episode actually, and the picture you're painting here is really helpful because you're showing how creating that culture of learning, creating that space for innovation in a company helps normalize using it as a tool and building understanding of it. It even goes back to your first point about, having the transparency and the reliability in what you're doing. Part of that is, making sure everyone's equipped with knowledge and you're giving them the space to experiment. So, in that world where they have the space to experiment and they're trying new things, they're growing as a company, it kind of then starts to butt up against maybe traditional ways that people ship products. And I wanted to ask about how traditional incident response has, typically always been a reactive process for teams. They wait for something bad to happen and then they get out the fire extinguisher and they go find the fire and put it out. But Rootly changes that model, and I want us to understand a little more about how, from your perspective, what are the key differences between a proactive and a reactive reliability practice, and what does it mean?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of characterizing it. Either it's proactive or reactive. And I think it's actually with the unlock of LLMs, can we truly be more proactive now? We built a very successful on-call business, incident response business that is primarily geared towards helping humans become faster and more consistent at resolving incidents. And, the maturity curve where most customers are, that is what they need. But what the future holds with LLMs becomes really interesting because the work that, if you think about your smartest SRE, your hardest working, your most, the SRE that's making, it's 700K a year that has, 20 years of domain knowledge, their ability to recognize patterns, their ability to, sift through large amounts of data that are relevant for your business is incredibly powerful. And that tribal knowledge is really unlocked by sometimes no one else. And this hero mentality starts developing and they start getting burned out. And with LLMs, what we can do now is harness everything that they can do, then replicate it across hundreds of agents that can simultaneously then do the work for you. So the way that we're solving for this right now is imagine when an alert fires. The first things that you will do is you will go check, maybe your logs and telemetry and traces and synthetics, check Datadog, you check Sentry, check, your GitHub, you maybe try to mentally correlate what were some of the past incidents that were occurring. And what we're able to do with our agents is, well, we can sift through large amounts of data instantaneously before that you even have time to flip open your laptop and tell you what the probable root cause is. And where this starts becoming powerful is the complexity of incidents is only going to increase over time. I'm sure you guys see it all the time. The adoption of coding assistance has been through the roof. Cursor,
Yeah.
is one of the fastest companies to reach 100 million. Everyone uses Copilot. I was recently in London with a private equity firm, and they have strict board level mandates to adopt coding assistance because they view it as,
Yep.
if we can get 5% more developer productivity, then why wouldn't we do it across, we have 1 million developers. That's a huge money save for them. But with these coding assistants and, if people are vibe coding into production right now, are new system dependencies that introduce problems and errors and incidents that we did not necessarily anticipate. And even your smartest SRE, that L7 SRE that we were talking about before, does not know those changes are occurring. So on the other hand, you need now a new wave of machines to help debug what other machines have done. So you're fighting the, the trend on both sides effectively. And that's where you can get, not only necessitate the need, but where proactivity then becomes important, because what systems like ours will be able to do is actually determine whether or not a human needs to be involved. And the future of that becomes really exciting. On one hand, you're identifying what the issue is. On the other hand, then you're able to identify what the right fix is and deploying the right fix, and all the way, shifting left into the point of pushing your code into production. You can emulate what the impact could be before you even make that change. I might be able to say to you, Andrew, hey, maybe I wouldn't do that. That seems really dangerous because of this and this reason.
Yeah, it's like predictive impact in a way. And what you're saying is really interesting, and it actually threads through something I've been hearing from recent guests on the podcast. It's actually quite interesting how this narrative compounds itself. So to connect to them, we had a recent guest, Tanya Jonka. She's a cybersecurity expert, and she really expressed how, cyber attacks and incidents are only going to get more and more worse. They get exponentially worse every year with the introduction of AI and agents and this kind of thing at scale. That risk is even higher. These fundamentals become even more important. And we spoke with another recent guest, Sagar Bachu, talked about API consumption in the future and about how it's going to be 10x as much as it was the day before, and how like overnight LLM consumers of services and tools are going to break infrastructure and are going to have profound impacts on how we've built these things. And now here we are at the culmination of that, in that you have to fight that big fire, like those 1,000 fires that are happening, with something that can predict where the 1,000 fires are going to happen and how you can minimize the impact of that. So if you're taking advantage of all of the benefits of an LLM and AI, you also have to take advantage of all of the protections that you need in that environment. Does that kind of thread through on kind of how y'all are thinking about it too?
Yeah, totally. I think it opens up selfishly for us, a whole new market of productivity that can occur, because a whole new class of incidents will start existing. And I think, the TAM that LLMs would open up for other software companies will also be quite enormous. But as with the good comes the bad to a certain extent. But I think the net positive is still there for most companies and for the space and category as a whole.
Yeah. And let's talk about the steps of getting to this, proactive model. And I think a lot of it comes down to cross-team collaboration. I was wondering, what's your perspective on how you see successful teams interact between, engineering, product, leadership? How do they work best?
I can probably share this best, or characterize this best through a few examples that we found particularly helpful. I think over time, the definition of roles and functions will change. There's a few things that we've done. One introduction was the concept of an AI engineer, a generalist AI engineer that we hired. And this person's job is to find effectively areas of opportunity where agents can do the work of our team, and also be the cultural influence for how other teams can think about adopting and using AI as well. So one of the things that we did was we had a 15-person team of BDRs that we had hired in Denver. And one of the things that we were able to do with an AI engineer was entirely automate how we prospect by using tools like Clay and Claude and merging them together with a few other things that we're doing. This person did not have a traditional, computer science background. And now we're going function by function and finding the opportunities of where this automation can now exist. We're finding a lot in our own reconciliation processes on the RevOps side of the house. We are finding it a lot on the support side of the house as well. And so I think this concept of where traditionally when we started as a company, engineers felt they had a role definition of just, hey, my job is to execute on these tickets and then I go home and do that. The lines are becoming more blurred, and we're very much so leaning into it. We're letting the role of everyone here to be more blurred. Adam, who is our head of marketing, is running a lot of our self-serve business now to ensure that's in a good spot because he has a ton of experience there. And that might not be, the role of any other head of marketing, but we're totally fine with that. And I think adopting that mentality becomes incredibly important, and it's changed how we interview people as well. We don't want to see them as you're only a specialist in a particular area. We want to see that you can be smart and be a generalist in many other areas if you had to be flexed towards it. Then also culturally, we've done things to allow everyone in the organization, not just customer success and not just sales and not just support, to be much closer to the customer. The tangible examples I can give is every single customer of ours has a shared Slack channel or Teams channel with us, and all of our engineers can access it. Sometimes they're working on a feature request for a particular customer. They're in there directly with the CTO of that customer, going back and forth on, hey, does this look good? What would you change? Here's how we're thinking about the next iteration of it, and getting feedback. And that takes a lot of time to deliberately codify, I would say. One of the things in the early days of our business that we did was there's this tendency to just start creating dashboards for the sake of creating dashboards. And I never really understood that. And I remember we went through this process of creating these product metric dashboards that measured if you became a Rootly customer in the early days, you would get a health score depending on your activity in the platform and a whole bunch of other factors. You got summarized into this number. And this number felt weird to me for the longest time because it ultimately distilled the uniqueness of you as a customer, the challenges and pains that you felt as a human into this number. Okay, you're a 7 out of 10. What does that really mean? So we went through and we deleted every single dashboard, every single product measurement tool we had. And we said the only way we are going to learn from customers is we are going to get on the phone with them. And we don't care if you're a $2,000 customer or you're a $2 million customer. First, we're going to get on the phone with you and we're going to uniquely understand what is working and what is not working. And that culturally has set, now we have a bunch of dashboards for what it's worth. That culturally has set the stage for us to be incredibly customer centric, to be close to customers, engineers interacting with them. It's changed how we hire, how we evaluate, all of that good stuff. And so I think to answer your question, a lot of it has to come tops down. A lot of it you have to think through systematically and codify, and you have to find these pockets of where people can really carry the culture and the behaviors that you want as a business that amplify that the best that you can. And oftentimes we get it wrong too. That we've done many, many things where we said, this is the right move. Then 2 weeks later, we said that was the wrong move.
It's an iterative process. And what you're highlighting here is, I think, really key about being very flexible and being a really good learner. That's where I think people are getting ahead right now, are people that are just really strong learners, really good teachers, able to communicate and move quickly, react to the unknown. And I like this culture that you're building that focuses on a customer obsession that really gets close to understanding their problems. And I want to talk about how that impacts like engineering, for Rootly, and how customer empathy plays a role there. Because, I think it's very typical for engineers and engineering leaders to focus specifically on the technical problems and forget about that connection to an end customer. So what does customer empathy in that kind of engineering environment look like to you?
Yeah, the thing to say, there are downsides of being too customer centric. There are really great engineers that have passed on us because of it. They don't want to be on the phone with the customer. They don't want to be interacting with the customer every day. They prefer to do hardcore engineering and process and system design stuff. And I think we've made that trade-off because, when you're not a Salesforce sized company or Instacart sized company, you don't have the luxury of a really good decision maker in every turn. I think we rely a lot on, we never A/B test. We always rely on our intuition and instincts to make the right call in a product. We much rather delete what we wrote and be wrong than to run a long drawn out experiment. I think that for us culturally has remained true. And because of all of those things that we do, being incredibly customer centric is important because we do not trust someone's opinion unless you can advocate and be somewhat the voice for the customer. Because then you don't have someone in that room making that decision that does have the customer empathy will override your decision most of the time because of it. And that becomes incredibly important to us as well, because we want all engineers to not just be engineers. We want them to make product decisions. Our product
Right. You want them
ultimately
to be
serves.
product engineers, right? And it's serving an end goal, an end customer.
Exactly. And so that's something that we found works, at least for us. We'll see if it works in the next 5 years. But for now, we're continuing down the track. If you ever sign up to be a Rootly customer, a lot of what you interface with is actually with engineers on our team.
That's cool. And I'm wondering, for engineering leaders who maybe are listening to this and thinking, maybe I want to try this practice. What are some habits or some key things that they could put in place for their own team to build that customer obsession, that customer empathy?
I think as an engineering leader, the first thing that you want to do, and where we really started, was consistently sharing the context into what they are building. Oftentimes, engineers will get locked into a particular work stream, a particular feature without understanding the larger picture. Because oftentimes I think we rely on, that's product's job to, have the overall holistic picture. Does it work for the startup? Does it also work for this enterprise? Is it important? Is it revenue driving? Is it a nice to have? Is it, closing a competitive gap? All of that nuance often gets lost and doesn't translate to what engineers do. I would ensure that context exists. It's not as noisy as you think it is. In fact, it's incredibly motivating in good ways, and also sometimes not in good ways. You might work on something in particular for a customer, and you don't end up winning that customer, and then it doesn't feel too great. But when you do, and you can see your work mapped directly to these outcomes, it triggers something in your mind where, hey, I really like that feeling. I want to do more of it. And so all of our engineering leaders, we have a weekly sales meeting. Our engineering leaders are part of that, so they can distill that to their team. And we post it publicly. We share it in our all hands. There's not a single engineer that works at Rootly that doesn't understand where we are revenue and customer wise more than an AE here as well.
Mm-hmm. And in everything you've guided through today, there's so many interesting new things to consider in the world of incident response. And when we think about incident response, it's kind of like it's table stakes for everywhere, right? Especially large infrastructure, critical infrastructure, things that when they go down, it's not just like, oh, you can't order pizza. Like, there are services that, life and limb can be on the line and provide key services and key scenarios. So something I've learned in having these conversations is that founders, they sit on these very unique precipices, and they have a very far vantage into how things are moving and evolving. And right now there's a lot of evolution. I wanted to ask you in our chat, what would you think is the future of incident management from where you're seeing it now, and in charge of Rootly? Where do you see it all going? Are there interesting or even scary or kind of like things that keep you up at night? Kind of curious to know.
Yeah, the lucky position we get to be in as a business is no matter how good a company gets at their incident management, they always still have incidents. So we have this fortunate problem where we never run out of supply necessarily. And it's a challenge that affects all verticals and businesses. And I often joke with our customers, they get on the phone with me and then tell me how bad their incidents are and how many they've been having. And I tell them, I say, well, that's great. It just means I can find a way to help you make that a little bit better at the very least. And I think it ties into a lot of what you called out previously. And the world is just going to get more complex, more sophisticated. Tools will naturally evolve. I think there'll be a new class of tools, a new way of working with agents. There'll be agents that go rogue and do the wrong thing, and those need to be detected and created as incidents. And do humans resolve those? Do agents resolve those? I think it's all to be defined still. I think the complexity in this landscape will change. And I think for us, the work, smart humans will always exist. We will always be the co-pilot to them in many ways. And their work will shift to become this new category of impactful things. They're not going to be on this category of like updating Jira tickets and writing status page updates anymore. Their brain is best harnessed to use elsewhere. And maybe that's using other agents to help agents. And so the world will get more proactively reliable as well because of it.
Fascinating. Well, you've given me a lot to really think about here about where it's all going. JJ, this has been a really fun conversation for me. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask, where can folks go to learn more about you and what you're doing at Rootly?
Yeah, I post a lot on LinkedIn. My mom likes every single one of those posts. I think they're somewhat interesting. I talk a lot about AI and how we build the company and a lot of the things that we're doing on the incident response side. I try to share quite a few photos of my dog as much as
Oh, I love that. I
possible.
love dog pics on LinkedIn. I'll definitely go check that out. Devinterrupted, we post a lot on LinkedIn too. So we'll have to continue the chat there. And if you are listening to this and have some thoughts about what we talked about today, please, jump in, let us know. You're going to be seeing this all over LinkedIn if you follow us. And so, because we're going to be talking about it. Based on your predictions of what's going to happen in the future, JJ, maybe we can have you back as like an update on the status quo of incident management, of incident response. So you can see what's evolving, because I think it's quickly moving.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we're going to link to this, the notes for today's talk and the show notes. And if you made it this far, our loyal listener, first off, thank you. Second off, you clearly really liked it. So be sure to like it, to subscribe to the podcast. If you're only listening to this, be sure to check out our Substack as well and what we post on LinkedIn. And so please reach out. And that's it for this week's Dev Interrupted. We'll see you next time.